So we are back to the study of the Spirit's book, and we are starting today the last chapter of the book, which is chapter 2 of book 4, Future Joys and Sorrows. This is the chapter, this is book 4. It talks about earthly joys and sorrows and future joys and sorrows. Only 2 chapters. We did the first one, finished last week. On future joys and sorrows, we are going to discuss nothingness, future life, intuition of future joys and sorrows, intervention of God in rewards and atonements, nature of future joys and sorrows, temporary atonements, atonement and repentance, duration of future atonements, a lot of atonements, resurrection of the body, and we end up the study of the Spirit's book with heaven, hell, and purgatory, which is a very interesting subject for us to finish. So, Philip, you start for us, 958.
Why do human beings have an instinctive horror of nothingness? Because there is no such thing as nothingness.
Yes, the idea of nothingness, like the ideas that we are going to discuss here, materialism, right, come from us rationalizing our beliefs and our thoughts. Because instinctively, as we studied before in the book, we bring the notion of a divinity, of a creator, of God or gods, depending on how much evolved we are. So for us to believe in nothingness or believe in the existence of the end of material life as being the end of everything, we have to rationalize. And that can bring, this, when you start thinking about that can bring this, what Kardec calls instinctive horror or nothingness, or the fear of nothingness, which is the fear of those that do not believe that we survive the death of the physical body, that we are going to end up being nothing after our physical body dies. So that's the fear. And the spirits just very clear say there is no such thing as nothingness. So there is always something, right? So that's the basic idea and answer from the spirits. Okay.
959. From where do we derive the instinctive sense of a future life? We already told you. The spirit knows everything before reincarnation, and the soul retains a vague memory of what it knew in its spirit state. Human beings have always been preoccupied with the question of life after death, and this is completely natural. Whatever importance they may attach to this life, they cannot help but wonder about the future, since this life is brief and may be cut short at any moment. What becomes of them after death? The question is a serious one, because it refers to eternity and not just a few years. The person who is about to spend many years in a foreign country tries to determine what his or her position will be there beforehand. In that vein, how could we not wonder what our state will be when we leave our present life, since it will be forever? The idea of reduction to nothingness is adverse to reasoning. The most negligent person about to leave this life wonders what is going to become of him or her, and involuntary hopes for something more. To believe in God without believing in a future life is illogical. The intuition of a better life lies in every human beings' inner consciousness. God cannot have placed it there without a reason. The concept of a spiritual life implies the preservation of our individuality after death. What is the point of surviving the body if our moral essence is lost in the ocean of infinity? Such a result is the same as reduction to nothingness.
Thanks. So, again, we derive the instinctive sense of a future life. We bring it with us when we are created and we develop the notion of a divinity, of a creator, is imprinted in our conscience, as we have studied in the Spirit's book. Also, we bring in our unconscious the remembrance of a life in the spiritual world and some past existences, some flashes of past existence. They are all there in our subconscious. Again, we need to rationalize to eliminate those thoughts. As Kardec says here, right? Human beings have always been preoccupied with the question of a life after death. Divaldo was talking on one of his lectures, right, about the primitive human beings, right? When a primitive human being sees another one dying in front of him or her, immediately he or she questions, right? Where did he or she went to, right? They were here, they are no longer here because the body is there, laying there inanimate. Where did they go? They must have gone somewhere, right? That's our instinctive reaction to death. Again, when we rationalize and we start, no, there's nothing after that. That's the end of it. So for those that cannot see beyond the physical life, but it's a rationalization. The majority of human beings have a notion, an instinctive notion of an afterlife and a concern of what's going to happen to us in the afterlife. It's natural for us to be curious, right? Most people have this at least vague concern of what happens after death, right? If you are religious and you are happy with what your religion tells you, you are comfortable with that, you don't question, you wait. If you are not happy with what religion tells you, you can start questioning outside religion and yourself, what happens, right? But the idea of nothingness is not something that will come to most people. It's a minority, and again, a minority, and you find on those, even those that believe that there is nothing, there is some hope there that maybe there is something, but they don't want to think about it. So it's more comfortable for them to believe that there is nothing, right? Now, Kardec brings a very good point here. To believe in God without believing in a future life is illogical, right? So if you believe in God, the Creator, and you believe in a just God and a benevolent God, then the natural conclusion is it doesn't make sense for us to come here, live a life completely different from one another, and that's the end of it. That doesn't make sense if you believe in God, right? So there has to be something else. What is this something else? There has to be a life after death. You have to survive the death of your physical body. And by surviving the death of the physical body, what happens after? A lot of people say, well, we'll see. Like my mother always told me, right? I tell her about, life in the spiritual world, and her answer to me was always, we'll see.
It's not wrong.
Yes, she will. like we all will. But so again, Spiritism tries to bring sense to the answers to our questions, right? It explains why, what happens, how it happens, what happens to us. It's not for everybody. Not everybody is comfortable with believing in that. Some people prefer to believe that there is nothing and continue believing there is nothing, and that's fine. But if you want the answers and you are comfortable with the answers that Spiritism brings us, it makes complete sense. It's very logical.
I think with and without God, the idea of nothingness is more difficult to rationalize than the idea of something after, whatever that may be. And you see that even outside of the idea of God. Even Socrates talks about the perpetuation of a life to want to leave the body behind. Plato talks about the world of the ideas. So even outside of religion and religiosity, the concept of something beyond the physical life is there in many of the social studies, if not with physical science, which not.
Yeah, it's everywhere, right? All the religions. Yeah, and again, thinking logically, right? Thinking about the whole population. Let's say 80% of the population in the world believes that there is life after death. It's very difficult to argue against this majority, because this majority comes from all sorts, all types, right? From primitive people, to educated people, to different cultures, different places in the world, right? And for you to defend the 20% that believe that there is nothing after, it's very hard, because if it was something, 50-50, and you choose a side, and there are good arguments on both sides, but a lot of these 80% that believe, they don't even know how to explain. They don't even know, if you ask them what happens and why do you believe that, I believe that. They don't have anything logical behind it, right? It's just instinctive. And again, 80% or I don't know how many will be instinctively wrong. It's more difficult to believe in that than to believe that the 20% that rationalized it are the ones that are right.
Yeah, especially when these cultures that does not have any contact with one another, then you could say, oh, being influenced by one another, but they all have the same idea of something after the death of the physical body. Cultures that have not been influenced by one another because they never met one another. So there has to be truth in this quantity. Usually we look at quality, but sometimes quantity plays its weight. And in this case, as I said, 80%. And cultures were completely separated from one another, have the concept of spirituality or perpetuation of life after the death of the physical body. It has to be the truth. And the 20% is a problem of right, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, in the end, it's pride. Yes, definitely, because it's and Kardec is going to talk about it, pride here in questions here. But yeah, in the end, it's pride, because you cannot believe that there is something that you don't understand, or it's beyond your capacity of understanding, right? This is pure pride, right? Okay. Okay, Philip.
960. From where does the belief in future pains and rewards originate? It is an intuition of the reality imparted to each person by the spirit incarnated in them. Know this well. It is not in vain that this inner voice speaks to you and you are wrong in ignoring it. If you thought of this enough or more often, you would be better off.
Yeah, so future joys and sorrows, right? Or future pains and rewards, like they say in the question. It's something that we bring again. We've been through this through our incarnations, right? We faced pain and we faced happiness in different incarnations, and we have a remembrance of it in our unconscious, right? So we bring this in an intuition. And again, if we allow the intuition to talk to us, to come to the forefront of our thoughts, we, like they say here, the inner voice that speaks to you, if we listen to our inner voice, we will make some sense of it. Maybe not understand, but make some sense of it. Think of it as natural. We look at our present life, we see pains and sorrows here, and we can imagine that because we are facing pains and sorrows here, pains and rewards here, we are going to face that in the future also, going back to the spiritual world. Is it going to be only pain? Is it going to be only happiness? Or it makes more sense that it will be both? Again, it's logic. It makes more sense they will be both, right? We would, like they say here, if you thought of this enough and more often, you'll be better off. Meaning, we better prepare ourselves for the future, understanding that our future entails consequences for our actions, which, you know, can be positive or negative depending on our actions today, right? Okay.
961. What is the predominant feeling when one is dying? Is it doubt, fear, or hope? Doubt for the skeptical, fear for the guilty, and hope for the virtuous.
This is a very short question, and I love it. I think it's an answer so clear and direct from the spirits. You know, you in one phrase you describe what is the feelings of those that are facing death, right? Close to death, right? The skeptical, the ones that do not believe in anything after life, they will be in doubt because they will think if something else is happening there, if there is something else. It's impossible not to believe that they are not going to even question a little bit, right? They will have some doubts. If you are guilty and you don't know what's going to happen, what do you have? Fear, right? Everyone that is guilty here, fear being caught, right? That's the greatest fear of all those that make mistakes, go against the law, human law, right? You're trying to avoid getting caught, so you have fear. So if you are guilty of something and you were never caught by human justice, or you were guilty of something that is not punishable again by human law, but you are fearing what's going to happen after. And again, the more you studied about spiritual life, it's very common, right? We see spiritists, people that have recently come to spiritism, questioning where they're going to find themselves and fearing that they're going to end up in the lower zones, right? There is a common theme on spiritists. We are going to end up in the lower zones. And actually, I was watching Jorge Lahad this week, and he said, we should move away from this feeling. We're not going to end up in the lower zones. Lower zones are for the ones that are guilty and are repenting, right? They are feeling guilty and repenting and don't know what to do with all that information. We may feel guilty, but with the knowledge we have, We know what we have to do. Doesn't mean that we are going to do. That's a different story. But the majority of us, we know what we have to do. And we will be able to do something about it. So in that sense, we are not going to end in the what they call umbral, right? Which is a word that exists here in English also. We use lower zones. And I think that's very interesting, right? So, but again, hope for the virtues, right? You lived a good life. You did everything that you could according to limited by your imperfections, by your inabilities of achieving something, but you have some regrets. We all have regrets. We are imperfect spirits. But if we are not feeling guilty for some things that we have done, yes, naturally, but if we move on from that, we are hopeful that we are going to end up at least in a place like No Solar, right? Which is the hope for all spiritists. We are going to end up in a similar place like No Solar, right? But again, it defines all of those facing death here, right? In these three different types, right?
So, from what you're saying, from Alahat, we may have some kind of a misguided fear. Right?
Yes.
I'm asking now is, how about a misguided hope? Even in the cases that we see of spirits that come to us complaining and angry because they should be heaven, and
Yes.
the heaven that was promised.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I think you're right. But we as spiritists should not have that, right? We should have an understanding of our expectations, because looking inside of ourselves and analyzing what we've been doing, how we're behaving, and respecting our limitations. Of course, we're not going to hope to find ourselves next to in the happy worlds, because we know we're not there. But we should have the understanding that we at least should land in a transitory house of assistance, right? Because we can address our challenges, right? We know that arriving at the spiritual world, and after the natural period of perturbation, once we understand, okay, I'm back in the spiritual world, we know that we have to move somewhere, do something, ask for help, start working on something, right? Those spirits that are in the lower zones, consumed in guilty and suffering, they don't know that. They think that that's like André Luiz. He spent 8 years there, not knowing what to do and where to go, and with other spirits accusing him of things that he didn't believe he was, right? A suicide and things like that. But why? Because he didn't know what to do and where to go. We know. Again, doesn't guarantee, because each person has their own difficulties, and we don't know what's going to happen. But we should be prepared. At least all this study should prepare us, even if we haven't improved morally as much as we would like to improve, or we could. Intellectually, we have the ability to rationalize about our situation and make good use of our knowledge to address the situation, right? Okay.
962. How can skeptics exist, considering that the soul imparts the sense of spirituality to all? There are fewer skeptics than you think. Many of those who feign skepticism during life out of pride are much less skeptical when they die. The quality of our future life depends on our actions. Reason, supported by a sense of justice, tells us that the good and the bad are not mistaken in our ultimate sharing of happiness. God would not allow some people to obtain joy effortlessly, while others attain it only through much exertion. Our faith in God's justice and goodness, as evidenced by the wisdom of God's laws, forbids us to believe that the good and the bad hold the same place before God. Conversely, there is no doubt that eventually the good are rewarded and the bad atoned
For the,
for
evil,
the good.
for the evil they have done. The good here is wrong.
The evil they have done.
The bad for the evil they have done. They shouldn't have the good there.
Yeah, understood.
In the original, both are in the same phrase. The good and the bad are rewarded for the good and the evil they have done. All right, that's the original.
From an innate sense of justice, we derive an instinct of future rewards and atonements.
Okay, thanks, Philip. Again, what Elmo addressed a little bit, the pride, right? Skeptics exist because, we doubt anything beyond ourselves, right? So, and again, for those that have no believing religions, right? Organized religions. Let's talk outside Spiritism. You don't believe in organized religions because of everything that they did or because it doesn't make sense to you, like I was in my youth, right? For me, it didn't make any sense, religion. So if religions do not exist, how can God exist outside religion? Yes, theoretically. But if this is all that exists, what God would make so much suffering, so much injustice, that some people are rich, some people are poor, some people are sick, some people are healthy, some people spend their whole lives taking advantage of others and nothing happens to them. Some people only do good and a lot of bad things happen to them. Where is God in all that, right? You have to think beyond the physical life. But if you refuse to think beyond the physical life, you become skeptical. I think that's how you become skeptical of spirituality, right? Because it doesn't give you the answers for those questions that you have. But again, if we humble ourselves and start thinking that, well, if I don't know, it doesn't make sense, I don't have the answers, but there must be somewhere the answers. If you start thinking what we said, why does 80% of the world believes that there is something, there is a God, or there is spirituality, and I don't? If I'm curious and I'm humble enough to look for answers, eventually I'll find answers and I'll find that there is a God, right? Or there is a creator, if I don't want to call God. Now, if I stay in my pride and say, oh, this is all doesn't make sense and there is nothing beyond the physical life because God, there cannot be a God, and I end up there, these are the skepticals, right? Now, once you believe in God and you accept that God, a creator, exists, then you have to start analyzing. If our faith in God is all justice and all goodness, then there has to be something else, right? There has to be a beyond the physical life, which is something that maybe I don't understand yet. I need to look for answers, right? And that's a very rich industry out there with mediums, paid mediums, and all sorts of religions that take advantage of people looking for these answers and looking for hope, right? But the last phrase from Kardec here is very important. From an innate sense of justice, right? If we're looking for justice and we are humble enough to understand that there is a creator, and so it has to exist justice, our instinct of future rewards and atonements will be the logical conclusion of that, right? because we see, again, we go back to someone that takes advantage of others their whole lives and are not punished by human laws. If there is a God and there is justice, this person has to face the consequence for his or her actions somewhere, somewhat, right? But again, if you are humble enough to accept there is a power beyond what we know, you are going to be more comfortable with this idea of divine justice, right? Okay.
Okay, so when a brilliant mind like Einstein comes and says, I believe in the God that created man, not in the God created by man. I think that's a good point for us to reflect that maybe this presentation of God given to me doesn't need reason. There has to be something, because reason will lead me to believe there is something that creates, not only creates, but provides maintenance of what's being created. Reason will lead to that. Science leads us to believe in that. You know, they have the theory of entropy. Entropy proves the existence of God instead of disprove the existence of God, right?
Yeah.
So someone that has the humility of an Einstein to say, has to be something. But it's not what you guys are showing to me, it's gotta be something else. That goes against what the idea of justice, because some people that I've spoken with that does not believe in God, they do not believe in God exactly because all the injustices that they see around them. Like the samba lyric says, right? If I was God, the world would be a lot better. I would make things a lot better for everyone else. It's someone who already believes in God.
Yeah.
But this God is doing wrong. We have one working with us who was very angry with us, with God, I'm sorry. For a long time, the great difficulty was to try to God be less angry with God. Because God was wrong. God was doing things the wrong way. Because God allows a lot of bad things to happen here. There is a believing God right there. So I think the problem is intellectual laziness to say, well, the presentation of God as I have is illogical, doesn't make sense. Let me explore different things. The individual says, God does not exist because when you present God, it's ridiculous. And if there was a God, there would be not so many injustices, so much injustices. And they stop right there. They don't have the intellectual, proactive motion to go and search for something that is more reasonable to them.
I was reading, you talked about Socrates. I was reading Socrates this week, something very interesting, right? And talks about life and afterlife, right? Socrates said that everything is dual in life, right? You have black and white, night and day, everything you have one side and the other side. So for life, you have to have another side, because it's not possible that only life doesn't have the other side, right? And the other side of life is not death, because death is nothingness, right? So it cannot be, it has to be, right?
Yeah, the opposite of death is birth.
Yes. Yeah. So if you live, you are here, it has to be a there, the opposite of here, right? It's very interesting. Of course, Socrates was much deeper and profound than what I said, but the idea was basically that, right? Proving when he spoke when he was being
He was in jail, right?
in jail, condemned, and waiting for his execution, right? Or to drink poison, because it was very interesting. At the time of Socrates, they could not, there was a boat that went to an island, and it was a belief and tradition. And until the boat came back from the island, nobody could be executed, right? And the time of Socrates, there was some storms, the boat got stuck in the island. It took a very long time for the boat to come back, so he stayed in prison a very long time. And that's finally when the boat came, is when he drank the poison, right? But again, Socrates was, of course, one of the precursors of Spiritism, and it's very logical what he's saying, right? Okay. All right, Philip. We talked about God, so let's talk about the intervention of God.
963. Is God personally concerned with each person? Is God not too great? And are we not too small for each individual to be of any importance to the Creator? God is concerned with all of creation, no matter how small they may be. Nothing is too small or insignificant for God's goodness.
Yeah, the problem here is that, again, well, like I just said about Einstein, right? That here, this question is bringing God to our humanizing God, right? Because for us, how can we understand a God that is involved in everything in the whole universe, which is, trillions and billions of galaxies and things like that? Because we don't understand God, right? That's the reality. So to explain how God can be personally concerned with each person, humanizing God, is impossible. You have to accept it, right? Understanding that the Creator is we are the creation, and we are influenced by the Creator at all times, right? God is inside all of us, but we are not part of God, like I've been discussing for the last few days, right? This is the very beginning of the Spirit's book. We are the creation. We are not part of the Creator. If we are part of the Creator, we have no beginning, and we have, so if we are part of the Creator, then the Creator is not perfect, right? Because we are imperfect. And if we're part of the Creator is imperfect. I'm imperfect, the Creator is imperfect, right? So that doesn't make sense. So we are not part of God. We are God's creation, and God is part of our lives at every moment, right? But to go much beyond that, to try to understand how God's work, we will, once we become perfected spirits, right? But at our level of evolution, it's too much.
I think this is one of the very, very few things that I would have to say that we have to have a blind faith. We are not able to reason God yet.
Yeah.
To believe that God knows each one of us, that He's kept on me, that He knows what's going on with my life, it's a blind faith. Because I don't have the ability to try to reason it.
Yeah, no.
That is the very, very few things that I believe in spiritual, that we have to accept blind faith.
Yeah, and Divaldo,
you don't.
Yeah, Divaldo said, right, that he prays to Jesus because Jesus is more accessible, right? Because praying to God is praying to something that he doesn't really understand. So it's easier to pray for someone that he understands, right? And it's exactly that, right? You cannot explain, right? You can explain parts, right? You can discuss us not being part of God, being creations, right? Like they said, someone that the musician that plays the violin is not the violin, right? The musician plays the violin produces a beautiful music, but the musician is not the violin. It's was a creation of someone, right? But it's, I think we go to the attributes of God that are in the beginning of the Spirit's book, and we'll get there very soon again when we restart, right? And and the attributes of God, it's our limited ability to understand, right? God's perfection, right? All good or powerful, goodness, justice, and
Infinite.
Infinite. Yes.
And all of that.
And it's interesting because in the book, The Consoler, Chico asks Emmanuel, what comes first, justice or goodness? That's a very good question, right? And Emmanuel says, justice. Without justice, there's no goodness.
That's 3 days of philosophy right there.
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Okay. So,
964.
yes.
Is God concerned with each of our actions to reward or punish us? Aren't most of such actions insignificant to God? God's laws apply to all your actions, and if you violate them, it is your fault. When a person violates one of these laws, God does not say, "You have been gluttonous, I will punish you for it." However, God has set a limit. Diseases and even death are the consequences of overstepping that limit. Anytime you are disciplined, it is a result of violating a law. Everything happens that way. All our actions are subject to God's laws. Any wrongdoing on our part, no matter how inconsequential it may seem to us, it is a violation of those laws. When we experience the consequences of such violations, we can only blame ourselves, as we are the sole architects of our happiness or misery, as is shown in the following narrative. A father has educated and instructed his child on how to guide himself in life. He hands over a piece of land to him to farm and says, "I have given you the practical directions and all the necessary tools for making this land productive and earning a living. I have given you all the instruction needed for understanding those directions. If you follow them, your land will yield abundant harvests and you will be able to rest in your old age. If you do not, it will bear nothing and you will die of hunger." Having said this, he leaves him to his own devices. Is it not true that the land yields crops corresponding to the skill and care invested in its cultivation, and that any mistake or negligence on the part of the sun has a harmful effect on the harvest? Therefore, the son will be comfortable or poor in his old age, depending on whether he has followed or neglected his father's directions. God is even more farsighted. We are told at every moment whether we are doing right or wrong through the spirits that are sent to guide us, although we do not always listen to them. There is also the difference that if the son wasted his time, he has no opportunity to repair his lapses, while God would always give him the means of correcting his mistakes through new lives.
Okay. So it's very important here, right? We have to remember that when this book was written in 1857, Kardec brought a lot of new ideas and new concepts. So for him also to bring the concept of a God that does not reward or punish, I think it was a little too much, right? So but he brings a concept of God that created natural perfect laws. And when we deviate from those laws, we face the consequence. So it's not God punishing us directly, but it's us deviating from the natural law that will punish ourselves. And following the natural law, we will reward ourselves, right? So the laws, God's laws are perfect and unchangeable. We are the ones that decide what to follow, this or that direction, and in this or that direction, we are going to face the consequences. As the Spirit says here, God does not say you have been gluttonous, I'll punish you for it, right? There is the natural law. Your physical body was created by God, a perfect physical body, and depending on how you treat it, you have to face consequences for it, which is, you eat too much, you are going to face diseases or even death, as they say here, right? But this is not God punishing us. It's just the natural law. If we follow it, we are going to live a healthy life. If we don't follow it, we're going to face the consequences. So the spirits are very direct here in talking that God doesn't punish us or reward us, just as long as we follow the natural laws. And then Kardec gives a very good example, right, of this father that gives a land to his son and teaches the son how to take care of the land, and then leaves behind the son and the land. What the son is going to do with the land is the son's choice, right? And the consequences also. If he takes good care of the land will be productive and he will earn a living. If he doesn't do anything with the land won't produce anything and he will struggle. It's a very good example of us, in terms of the natural laws. God made us, made the natural law, created us, and gave us the tools to progress, right? According to our necessities and our limitations. And again, the law of cause and consequence. The more you know, the more responsible you are, because the more you understand God's laws, the more responsible you are, the more guilty you are going to feel for your own mistakes and receive your own conscience punishing you, right? When you don't know what you are doing, you never heard of anything like that and you make a mistake, of course, that's how we evolve. We are evolving by making mistakes and learning from our mistakes and not repeating them. If you have always done that, we reach perfection very fast. But fortunately, we don't do that, right? We make the mistakes, we insist in repeating them more than once, and then we create more difficult consequences for us. So again, it's important for us to understand that God created us, created the natural laws, created everything. How we use our free will on our journey, our progress is on us. It's again, we talk about, we discussed fatalism and free will some couple of months ago, right? We all have free will. There are some things that are part of our journey, the death of the physical body is something we cannot avoid. But how we get there, the way we get there, and what's the consequence of it, everything depends on our free will. And Kardec finishes by saying that God is even more far-sighted, meaning God gives us endless opportunities. We can repeat the mistake 1,000 times. We're going to have 1,001 opportunity to repair the mistake. Of course, the more we insist on making the mistakes, the more difficult it's going to be, because we are making it more difficult for ourselves. It's a natural consequence of our stubbornness, right? It doesn't make sense for the challenges to be the same if we are repeating the mistakes, because they have to be harder for us to make a bigger effort to overcome the same challenge, because in that way we are going to learn not only for that mistake, but in a more ample sense of being more disciplined and being more focused on our progress. Okay.
I think the spirits are very, very decisive, make a differentiation between God and God's law, two different things. God is the creator of those laws. And if you see the very beginning of the chapter that deals with God's laws, it's stated by the spirits that God created those laws for our happiness. And since they are perfect and they are meant for happiness, God is not going to change them. Although God sees me, He sees and my struggles, He sees my mistakes and how I use my free will. God has a set of laws that will take care of all of those things. And as long as I pay a little attention to those that God sends on my way to help me to correct myself, I'll be redirecting my energies and follow those laws eventually. But it's important to differentiate. There is no punishment, there is no reward. There is cause and consequence. The parable of the son is exactly a teaching of cause and consequence. And the opportunity of reparation. Come back and repair, come back and repair as many times as needed.
Danny.
So, in the case of some religions or people who follow what is in the Bible,
Literally.
yeah, like they follow the Bible as the God's laws or the natural law, like let's say, right? Not man's laws. But then there are certain things in there that it doesn't represent much of God's love or God's laws, like discrimination stuff to specific things.
Mm-hmm.
So it fits into the same category. The more you know, the more responsible you are, or
yes.
In that case, it's in the side of the ignorance.
Yeah, and again, you cannot judge all the people there that are discriminating. But again, the same discriminating words that they find, if they look deeper and study deeper, Jesus said, "Love your enemies," right? Does that goes before the discrimination, or love your enemies that that are in the same place that that think the same, your enemies just because of a financial dispute, but not of a different belief? That's not the case, right? It starts with love your enemies. Everything that deviates from the teachings of Jesus, the moral teachings of Jesus, which are the basic one: do to others what you like the others to do unto you, love your enemies, love God above all. If they know that, the rest, they cannot complain. They cannot claim complete ignorance. There will be consequences, because
But at the same time, they say certain things the Bible says is a sin. So God says it is a sin. So you're not discriminating, you are just categorizing some certain things that are sins, and that's the God's law. So it's complicated.
Yes. Again, if you follow the 10 Commandments, every time you do something against the 10 Commandments is a sin, right? But again, above all is love one another and love your enemy. So you cannot persecute. You can try to find justice, right? You can try to. Jesus lived amongst the criminals and amongst the sick, right? He said, "I didn't come for the healthy. I came for the ones that are sick," right? So these people in the church that claim to be following the 10 Commandments and the Bible literally, are they doing exactly what Jesus told them to do? And it's there, it's in the Bible. It's just that they pick and choose parts of the Bible. And if they pick and choose parts of the Bible, they'll have to face the consequence for their choices, even if they claim that it was written there. Because going back to the basics of Jesus' teachings and the 10 Commandments and the love one another, you cannot pick and choose. Some of the teachings supersede the others, right? Again, a person committed a crime. It's our responsibility to protect the person from itself and society from that person. If you need to put in a prison, in isolate, in re-educate. But to kill or to treat the person in a way that is not human goes against the divine law, and they know better, we know better.
I'm not sure what seems is with religion. As John said, if you take one of the teachings of Christ, pure and simple, it becomes a lot easier, because you're not going to see any or many things that Jesus would judge to be a sin. If you go literally to other teachings, let's say you cannot eat meat and meat with milk. It is in a scripture. But when Jesus came and said they came here to reinforce their laws, not to go against them. So he established what all that is against the natural laws, and pretty much abolished everything that is. There were man-made laws that had its value when it was created, was very useful and important. Do not talk to the dead. Are we all sinners over here because we practice spiritism and a doctrine that is created from the dead? Are we sinners? One would say no, right? So the issue of sin, I agree with you. It goes in accordance with the knowledge of each individual. But the question that I have is, why is that knowledge so limited, with so many opportunities to expand our knowledge, to expand our understanding? Why are we limiting ourselves to a narrowed knowledge, since we have now so many things available to expand it? I think that is the sin. That is the slap in the face of God, provided all the opportunities, everything that we have to develop ourselves, and we stay inside of cocoon of religion or anything else because of pride.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we are going to stop here. Next week, we are going to go to the nature of future joys and sorrows.